Hello, everybody. Sorry, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Andres. Thank you, everybody, for introducing. I'm now leading a new panel in our session. Unfortunately, we start to be a little late, so we have some time pressure on us in order to keep the attention of everybody on our ideas we want to share and the results of the research performed by our panelists. So I'll be brief in introducing this panel on a topic linked to employment and paradigm shift in this area related to the transport sector. It is a very important topic, and we have the honor to listen during the next 30 to 40 minutes to three key experts. One which is Livia, who comes from the European Transportation Workers Federation. So she will bring the perspective of employment and trade unions in this discussion. Laurie pick up an international consultant and professor who will bring an international perspective in this topic, and Maria Chiara, a researcher and academic in Dublin, who comes with results from different research activities she was involved in. Not staying too much on me and giving the time to our speakers, I want only to remind the context of employment and smart mobility sector. It is one of the key areas where European Union is looking for improvements in gender equality. Maybe taking consideration only the economic perspective, we can say that the participation of women in transportation sector is much lower as compared to male workers. It is something like at least 11 to 15% lower, and the average pay is more than 50% lower for women. And in this case, gender equality can be translated in an increase of GDP. Of course, prejudice and sometimes labor-intensive work environment are excuses for such situation. But as we are researching in our TInnGO project and the package where we are involved in, we are looking for solutions to encourage women to be active as professionals, both at let's say executive level, but also as entrepreneurs, and to bring a new spirit in this transport sector. I will hold my speech now, and I will extend the floor to Livia to have the first presentation in this panel.
Good morning, Stefan. Good morning, everybody. I will share my screen, so I will show my presentation. Can you confirm that you see the presentation?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. I'm trying just to put it on. No, okay. So I'm Livia Spera. I'm the General Secretary of the European Transport Workers Federation. We represent more than 5 million transport workers from 40 countries in all transport modes. First of all, thank you very much for having invited us. It is indeed a very interesting event, and the initiatives that you are taking is certainly very relevant. I have to admit, I was a bit surprised that we weren't involved, at least as conducted earlier, because the big part of the scope of your project is also very dear to us, obviously. Starting earlier in the previous panel, it was mentioned the platform for change, which was initiated by previous transport commissioner. So the platform for change was initiated, as it was said, because Commissioner Bulc was particularly sensitive to gender issues. We also had, in fact, we were one of the initiators. We had a lot of conversations with her, and she showed a lot of attention to this. Of course, we have been involved, as I said from the beginning. We're one of the founder organizations, but we also know, we also aware, and we're very critical member, because we are aware of the limits of this approach that was taken back then. One of the issues is that obviously this platform is for us too much focused, or is focused mainly on transport users, whereas it doesn't give the necessary attention to women transport workers, and consequently, sometimes we are not asking the right questions. And for these reasons, we decided to start our own survey on why the transport sector is not attractive to women, why women, so little women, which was mentioned earlier, is about 22% of the transport workforce. Why why women are not attracted to work in transport, and why especially women are not retained in the sector once they start working in it. And so we had an online survey together with our affiliated unions, and we had more than 2,700 answers. And the objective of this survey, as I said, was to find our own evidence, was to, let's say, ask the right questions, which we think weren't really asked by the work that was being done by the European Commission. The final report of this survey will be published on the 28th of October, and we will be very happy to share it with you, of course. In a nutshell, these are the main findings. I will not. Sorry, sorry. I will not go through all of them, as I understand we are late. But basically, you see that there is a big feeling. 49% of the surveyed women feel that there's no priority at workplace for a safe and adequate environment for women. They think that there is 25% think that there is a wage discrimination. The 35% feel that the employers and the manager fail to treat employees equally, so there is gender discrimination. And 50% believe that there is not enough opportunity for promotion and development. So these are, there's no surprise for us about this, but this is what we what we found out through this survey. What are the main concerns from women? It will be exposed in the report. There is a masculine culture. We're not just talking about urban public transport here, but it's a bit cross-sectoral, of course. But there are issues related to work-life balance. So working hours and penalties for family-related leave. Working conditions and sanitary issues are among the most serious concerns. We are talking about very basic issues here. We're talking about toilets. So a woman is not encouraged to join a public transport company to drive a bus or to ride the tram if there is no adequate toilet facilities. It's something I would say quite basic, and is even more let's say astonishing that this has not been tackled yet. Of course, there is a matter, it was mentioned earlier, there is a matter of violence and harassment at work. There is a lot of third party violence, but there is also in general also a quite hostile climate towards women, and there is an acceptance of harassment practices against women. Of course, we represent transport workers, and one of our objective is to promote gender equality, to promote female employment in the transport sector. We are committed to contribute shattering the glass ceiling. We are committed also to work with our unions, because our union also need to work with their own members to try to go over the dominating male culture in the transport sector. And of course, we want to fight for fair, equal, and violence-free workplaces where women would get more employment opportunities and better employment opportunities. I mentioned in the beginning that we think that in the European Commission's approach, the focus was too much on women as users of transport. For us, it is clear that there is a connection. The more women will work in transport, the better public transport will be for the women who use it. So that is why we think that all the discussion should always include an employment dimension. And on the slide, I will not read it, but on the slide there is a quote from a railway worker who answered the survey. There will be more of those in the report, which you see explains it all. So as I said, our final report will be published on the 28th of October on our website and our social media. So I encourage you to follow it, and if you are interested, just get in contact with us. Thank you very much.
Dear Livia, thank you. We shall keep the questions for the end of the panel. So after all three panelists have delivered their speeches, already some of the participants are writing questions, which is very good. But as again, time is against us, I will ask Laurie to take the floor. Laurie, can you speak?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
Can you see everything now? Yes?
Yes, yes.
Fine, Laurie.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, my thank you to TInnGO for the opportunity to wear a shirt. I'm very much in agreement with what Livia was saying, and also the comments Hilda made right at the beginning about this technological myopia that we get into when we're talking about gender. There is a huge amount to do in this area. I want to talk to you about work I've been doing with the World Bank and with UN Women over the last year. There will be a special course that will be published online around the new year. This is just a little bit of that, but there's a lot to do. But I think there's a silent global revolution that I'm going to go through in the next 5 minutes. Firstly, I want to say, what are the barriers and what are the success stories? Of course, women are meant to do perfectly happily what's on the left of this picture, but they're not very good at getting into jobs that are on the right of this picture. It's something we're all very much aware of. And for women in many areas of the underdeveloped and developing world, who live in villages, in close families, in small towns, small communities, it's a question firstly of being noticed and the opportunity of getting into employment. The whole issue of getting employed, being accepted by your fellow workers, by your household that you're doing the job, by the community that you work in, and also for getting respect for what you do. There's a whole number of things that you need to get through on that. Or, as many women have done, many champions in many countries, take the initiative, take the bull by the horns and do something yourself. The glass ceiling, Livia has just mentioned. I don't want to go over that. In many areas, it's not just the quantity of the work for women, it's also the quality. But one point I want to make is that transport is a massive sector, as we all know, and it's evolving, it's changed. I've been working in this sector since '75 on gender. It's changed massively. And we're now moving from transport to mobility to accessibility. And in my little professional silo, when I look at LinkedIn now, there's a pretty good gender balance of the photographs facing me. But it's not the same across all the sectors, of course. But the industry is getting much more multi-sector. It's getting much more multidisciplined. It's getting much more going into sectors around it. And there's a lack of data on this. I'm not sure we're collecting the data on this, and it really would be good to have the evidence of what's happening. If we're talking about the formal transport sector, employing women has a huge number of issues, which Livia has just got into some of them. Discriminatory laws and regulations, terms and conditions, poor facilities, high risk of sexual harassment and assault. That is one of the biggest transport problems in the world. And the sooner that transport stakeholders wake up to that, the quicker. And also the lack of social connections and networks that women have in many world societies. And I just want to touch on one or two success stories. Clearly, we're now getting women more into the engineering sector. I think they're searching for a spider or insects here, but anyway, the idea is there is a woman there, she's a senior engineer working in Africa. This is one I want to particularly dwell on. This was from the Women and Transport Conference I attended in Addis Ababa last December. There are women here from 12 African countries, Anglophone and Francophone. They all work in the transport sector. They all told their stories, and these women have been through hell. They've either been harassed in the job by their fellow workers, they've been harassed by customers, they've been harassed by their villagers for doing the job, they've been harassed by their families. Why are they going out and getting a job in the transport sector? And thanks to the unions, they fought their battles and they got through, and that is quite an amazing photo that you saw there. It's not just in Africa. In the USA, there have been some pioneering women who are putting women into the HGV driving sector in the traditional male sector in the USA and Canada. Here we are in Central Asia, where a lot of the countries there actually have laws preventing women from getting into certain occupations, and the transport sector is actually one of the worst sectors in that respect. And here we have Ludmila, was the first female bus driver in Kazakhstan, but that didn't just go through the bus drivers, it also went through management and so on. And in Russia as well, they're reducing this direct legal discrimination. But this is something that the unions and the international agencies are doing a lot to try and get rid of. A lot of people in the world travel on informal transport, tuk-tuks, dalas, whatever you call them, jitneys. And this is an area where there has been a big dynamism in terms of gender. A lot of women who got fed up being harassed on the back of a motorcycle taxi decided to get some money together, buy one themselves, set up their own business. There are a lot of women driving these types of vehicles in the informal sector, the ride-hailing sector, the new shared economy, whether it's powered by apps and so on, or whether it's just being out there on the street. And women actually like to use transport that's driven by other women because they feel safer. I'm surprised no one's mentioned the segregation issue yet. I would think that's a really hot topic. But there are lots of women who will use these, and there are lots of micro enterprises, and EU money can go into the underdeveloped and less developed countries to actually provide startup money and ways to develop their own businesses. But it's not only that. If we take the country like underdeveloped countries where most of the road system is unsurfaced, a lot of it is unmaintained. So what the international agencies are doing, like here in Nepal, for example, 5,500 kilometers of the road system, which is more than 60% of their territories, have been given over to these gangs of women. These women from villages who otherwise would have no chance of working at all, no chance. But they get together in these gangs, they're given safety, they're given childcare, they're given free bank accounts, they're told how to develop themselves. There's a whole package of things, and they go out there and they're doing it. They're doing it in Bolivia, they're doing it in Nicaragua and many other areas. This is a real chance for women who otherwise would have no chance at all. And there are many areas of the world where to win the contract, 20% of the workforce must be women. This is to me, a rather unpleasant environment in the Khyber Pass in Pakistan, but there are also examples in Colombia and elsewhere. And I've got my last slide here. What I'm really trying to say here is that gender, apart from all of the social and lifestyle benefits, when you're talking to stakeholders, gender is smart economics. It benefits everybody, absolutely smart economics. There's no losers. And the question for the Commission is, work out how you can put pump priming money in there to get things going. And I want to finish on that, although I do show you an example from work we did on harassment in Egypt that we could come back to in the questions. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you for the presentation and the interesting examples from worldwide. Now to move a little further, I will ask Maria to take the floor. And again, after Maria's presentation, we have prepared a small poll for our participants, and we shall go for some questions and comments regarding the information delivered by the panelists. Thank you. Maria, the floor is yours. And sorry for the siren. Unmute your, please unmute, Maria. You are muted.
Thank you, Stefan. I probably need permission to share my screen.
Yeah, Laurie, can you stop sharing your screen, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. So 1 second. I'll try and be as fast as I can. And The project that I'm presenting is actually a partner project with TInnGO. So Diamond is the other European project that has been funded under the same agreement and under the same funding call. And it's about actionable knowledge for women in transport. It's in general, there are more than just this case study. So the one I'm presenting is the case study about the employment in rail. Specifically as a sector, and we've been doing a pilot study comparing an Irish and a Spanish case study, but there are other, and as Livia was saying, it is actually quite true that improving the employment of women in the sector will actually impact also how women use that same service. As Laurie was saying, actually there is a marked gender segregation within the sector and has been reported widely. We know from the thematic analysis, we know already from the thematic analysis of just the literature, not talking about even the interview that we're carrying out, it's not really an equal opportunity market. And even if it says it is, there are issues then in the lack of flexibility, because many group of women perceive, for instance, the inflexible working hours as a barrier for their personal.
Maria, sorry for interruption. Can you change the view of the presentation?
Yes, of course.
You are on two screens.
Yes, yes. Can you see better now? Sorry, yes, okay. No, and we were saying, so there are barriers that are still there, among which the inflexible working hours, due also to the segregation, because it has been designed by men for men so far. And in general, they still also face more discrimination, not just within their work environment, also externally when they are in the community. In fact, security is still an issue for them as workers. So on the basis of this thematic analysis, we drafted a preliminary survey. It's a pilot survey that actually, it's not so much, the data we collected is useful, but it's also useful in terms of potentially making this available for companies to benchmark themselves and reach a stage where we can have a sort of a fairness maturity model where everyone can actually identify their own area of improvements, because we notice that there is a strong difference. Well, not such a strong difference. There are areas of commonalities, but also discrepancies, even within the European Union, within two countries of the European Union that we would have thought would have been on par. And they're not, apparently. In this, I'll show you some examples. So for instance, if we consider the work environment meaning not just the context of the organization that people work in, but the context of the social economic context they are in. We found, for instance, even for the Irish case study, that there are still a lack of initiatives of promoting women in the transport sector. This is changing, but it still needs improvement. The lack of role models, or the lack of support within the community for these type of choices. And we're talking about not development countries, we're talking about a Northern European country. And the same, and the agreement is there even for the Southern European case study. So the area of improvement on the context are in agreement that they're the same. And when we look inside the job organizational conditions for instance, the Northern European case study, we found flexibility of the working hours and flexible working arrangement are an area of an issue. And similarly, we found that in the Spanish dataset, plus the problem in this case of dismissal or demotion after coming back from a career break, critically parental leave. If we disaggregate the data, and this is an example of disaggregation based on gender, but if you disaggregate also on other characteristics, you find that there are subgroups that need special attention. Okay, for instance, in this case of disaggregation, we find that women and particularly frontline staff. So if we disaggregate in respect of the job role, frontline staff find their work inflexible, and this inflexibility is a big issue for them and for the uptake of women on these roles. If we disaggregate in base of gender, in this case, we find that actually the level of acceptance of female in the working place seems to be in this case seems to be okay, but actually when we look into it, women still perceive that their level of acceptance is not as okay as it should be, okay, as this is the case here. I'm going to skip some out through and this is the same for the Spanish and the Irish data set I wanted to say, but security is still an issue. And actually in the Northern case study was more so than the Southern European case that we had in this particular instance. And training particularly when coming back to work after a parental leave or a career break, or also cultural sensitive training for diversity in general, not just for women, but just for the possibility of accepting a diversity culture within the company. And this is true, so unconscious bias is true for both, and the fact that the personal circumstances are still not met in many cases. This is true for the Irish transport operator, while for the Spanish transport operator we surveyed was more the lack of support from the community side for them. We also asked about COVID, and we found, not surprisingly, that there were issues in respect to how the company facilitated their extra duty due to the COVID pandemic. So the fact of having children at home from school was perceived as a big issue for many of the workers, and the lack of flexibility in that respect became a problem. And in some cases, the perceived of safety clearly more so for the frontline workers and the people that were allowed to work remotely. When we did a little bit of a retrospective, or let's say we did a regression analysis to highlight what are the characteristics in all of them that we surveyed that more strongly affected people in their perception of satisfaction with fairness and inclusivity of their work experience. And organizational and HR policies are always coming on top, always. Because the transparency and the having a baseline that it's fair for everyone and transparent and for everyone to see, it's a hard fact that needs to be established first and foremost. And then we're looking at protection of workers. So Livia works in the area where this has a critical role, still has a very critical role, and maintains that position. It's actually very close, first or second, they're very close. This is for the Irish transport operator. You'll see the Spanish case study gave the exact same results in first and second position. Peer acceptance appear another strong factor, and organizational capability to cater for individual needs. So not just look at the overall group, but individual needs. There are subgroups, as I said, with different caring responsibility that are or not accommodated. And here, the effect of job segregation also appeared among the very significant variables. And in the Spanish data set, you'll see that again, the first, so the organizational policy, but also the capability to meet and provide ad hoc training or capability to care for required need, and the protection of workers is very important. The future work that we are currently carrying out are in-depth interviews, online interviews due to the pandemic, but however, it's more in-depth data analysis, qualitative analysis with critical roles that we're interviewing, frontline and managerial. And we found interesting scope of work here in the way graduate campaigns are targeting. For instance, look at the Irish Rail recent graduate campaign. The talent manager of the company decided to put female fore and front on every one of the posters. And that had a massive effect on the intake of this year, which for the first time reached a 50-50. And this is work that needs to be, because we're still gathering information about not just the problems, but the good practices that are starting and that are out there to be shared as part of the benchmarking, not just the problems and comparing notes about the things that we're still lacking, but also the things that we are actually doing right and we're moving in the right direction for. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And if you have questions, I very much welcome them. Thanks.
Thank you, Maria, for sharing this research. All three presentations were very interesting, and I think they show one common denominator. The low involvement of women in transport sector is, in my opinion, linked to mentality and prejudice, and this is where we have to work about. We have prepared a small poll for the participants, and Elena, if you can share with us. So please take an answer. It is related to your vision of the link between technology and again employment market. Would be very useful to see what people think on this topic. You select one of the three answers and just simple press submit. If there is any a question for our panelists, please write them now. In order not to have, let's say, dead moments, and also to try to come back to the initial schedule, I will ask a first question before everybody gets over timidity. I would ask Maria also what is her vision of this link between evolution of technology and basically building this concept of smart mobility sector and breaking down the barriers for women.
It's very interesting you asked me that question, because that's exactly what I thought when I saw the pool. I think actually, I know that you put it as an alternative choice, and I've chosen the first element, being positive about it and thinking that the fact of having a labor market that is less labor intensive in the sense of physical labor as well would make it more ergonomically accessible for women. Because, you know, also in terms of aging workforce, we found that female and male age differently. So we become a little bit more fragile sooner than the male counterpart, and that affects us in terms of, for instance, maintenance jobs. However, I must tell you that unfortunately we also found that education paths are still, there is still a segregation in the education paths, and not because we're not having equal opportunities, but we still have less women in the STEM sector, and we know this as in academic environment, we know that this is still an issue. So even when we discussed the graduate program with Irish Rail, and they found that they go to college and universities like in the engineering environments, and they promote women in intake into their workforce, and unfortunately the ratio even in the classroom is 1:8 or 1:9, 1 female to 9 male students. So I'm afraid we still have to work on both terms. So the economical accessible physical labor being less of a problem, but also the STEM and the educational path to make it more women available to take up those jobs.
Okay, Maria, thank you. We have received a question in the chat. Will the companies act as, on themselves to improve gender and the diversity, or do they need prompting? I would ask Livia to give a comment on this challenge.
Thank you. I think it would be difficult to find one single action. Education is certainly crucial in the framework of a sector that is changing. It was also said by the previous speaker, we may have, the sector is changing, obviously. We also need to think in terms of platforms that are growing in providing urban public transport sector services. So there is certainly, I would say the first action to take would be to include and to mainstream gender issues into policies. This is something that's it's included in the gender equality strategy from the European Commission, but we still didn't see it in transport policies in a very pragmatic way. Now there is a new transport policy that is being designed, a new mobility strategy that is being designed at the moment, and our request there is exactly to take into account gender concerns, mainstreaming gender concerns all along the policy making. Where actions can be taken. I think training in the current development, training is certainly a very important issue.
Can I just one small thing to this, because Cristina Marolda actually made a very useful comment. I said labor, for instance, the fact that the technology might help in making more ergonomically access work, but also in the remote working environment, this is giving much more flexibility, and we found this in our study in the interview, in the thematic analysis of the interview collected. And this will give the flexibility that we need for giving access to more position to female that are currently shying away from certain role in fear of the lack of flexibility that we now potentially can have.
Yeah, thank you both. And we just received the results of the poll. So before going to Laurie to have also a final comment on this, the answers are pretty interesting. Basically, more or less are equal, the answers, but the largest 37% is in favor that automatization will not change anything on the labor market. And indeed, based on some comments we can see in the chat area, maybe there are a lot of other factors to be taken in consideration when we put technology and inclusiveness in the same, let's say, in the same balance to check the future. Just to conclude this part of our conference of the forum, I would ask also Laurie to coming back to the international experience. In all these examples that you witnessed and monitored, do you think that we can find in the end some real good practice that can be taken as an example or a sort of a quick win for the European cities?
Yeah, well, thanks for the chance to make a comment. To start with, a little bit provocative in the context of EU programs, I think given there is so much to do in this area, and so much that is being achieved by many good people across the world, I think automation and too much technology are a distraction for good stuff that's going on. Certainly what I've found from the work we did in Egypt with the Egyptian National Railways to get over a ridiculous situation where 96% of women are sexually harassed or assaulted in Cairo. And that's virtually everyone, isn't it? As to how to do that. And we worked with the National Railways, and as we worked through it, it became clear that there was no one eureka solution. And what you have to do is you have to work with staff at all levels, as we said, from boardroom to the platform. And we had to look at policy, design, management, and operations. But you have to do actions at all different levels. And this has been seen in a number of places over the world. The work Heather Allen and Jeff Turner did in Papua New Guinea, for example, was the same thing, from strategic down to specific action. So I think my lesson would be treat it as a holistic issue and address it on all the levels that you need to address it. And that would be my main takeaway. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Laurie. And Thank you, Livia and Maria. I think your inputs were very, very interesting and useful for our participants. And after the conference, we shall share the PowerPoints you have prepared. And I guess also after the conference, those who are interested can get in touch with you for more comments and discussions on the topics that are of common interest. Andre, I now hand over back to you in order to get back on the track with the rest of the forum. Thank you again.